In today's episode, we've got my favorite band, aggressive shirt salesman, and goldfish on a tax return. It's time for your Jewish week. Hey everyone, welcome to Your Jewish Week, the podcast for everything Jewish in the week ahead. I'm Rabbi Dovi. As always, this podcast is produced by Chabad.org and dedicated to all our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. May Hashem keep them safe from all harm, and may all the hostages finally be freed to return to their families and loved ones. Today is Sunday, the 11th of Shvat. If you're in the New York City area, the latest time to read the morning Shema this week is going to be at 9:28 a.m., and Shabbat candlelighting will be at 5:12 p.m. As always, halachic times for your location can be found quickly and easily at Chabad.org/times. Starting us off as usual with the weekly Torah portion, this week's Parsha is Parshas Yisro, easily one of the most famous portions in the Torah with a lot of very historic events, so let's jump in. We open on Sunday with Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, coming to visit the Jews in their desert camp and publicly praising God for his miraculous salvation of the Jewish people. Yisro himself wasn't an Israelite, of course, but he was a longtime fan, like even in the Egypt days before it was cool. Monday and Tuesday, we've got Yisro advising Moshe on a more efficient way to resolve the Jewish people's legal questions, and Moshe agrees with his father-in-law's suggestion and implements the changes. Moshe then gives Yisro a respectful send-off, as son-in-laws often do to father-in-laws who offer unsolicited advice. Okay, it wasn't like that. Yisro was heading back home to convert the members of his family to Judaism. Wednesday's reading, we arrive at the real headliner for this week, the giving of the Torah. 6 weeks after leaving Egypt, the Jews finally arrive at Mount Sinai, and God explains exactly what's going to happen here. The Jewish people are going to become an Am Segula, a treasured nation, a nation of holy priests. In other words, after what's going to happen at this mountain, Jews will no longer be just another nation. They will be forever different, a different species. There will be no going back. Thursday, we'll see some more preps for the giving of the Torah, 3 days of abstinence to ensure purity, and immersion in a mikvah. Then, as we head into the sixth reading, we'll see the mountain come alive as God himself descends upon it in thunder and lightning and relates the 10 Commandments. And finally, on Shabbat, we'll wrap things up by describing the Jewish people's response to this awesome revelation and 2 bonus prohibitions, the prohibition against making an idolatrous carved image and ascending the altar using stairs, which is not allowed because of the immodesty it creates. Parshas Yisro contains a mere 72 verses, so if you're a fan of small portions, this is the one for you. And our memory key for this week is the name Yonadav, which for a change isn't from the book of Ezra. It actually comes from the book of Kings. As always, check out the link in the show notes for more insight into this week's keys. Moving on to the weekly Tanya, we'll open up this week by discussing Torah and mitzvos. Specifically, the Alter Rebbe will walk us through the tremendous connection to God we establish by doing his commandments and even more so by learning his Torah. On Wednesday, we'll pivot and describe the exact opposite, the disconnect that is caused by transgressing Hashem's will and associating yourself with the forces of impurity, which is called klipa in Kabbalistic terms. The Alter Rebbe makes a fascinating point. You see, the klipa itself was created by God with a role to play. Its role is to try and lead you off the proper path. So, when you think about it, the klipa itself, even when it opposes God, is more or less just doing its job. When a Jew follows the klipa's path, however, he is not doing his job. He is rebelling. So it comes out that a Jew who succumbs to his evil inclination is worse than the evil inclination itself. This fact, says the Alter Rebbe, makes a Jew inherently opposed to the idea of sinning. Of course, people do end up sinning, but that's only because a momentary spirit of delusion, a spirit of folly overcomes them and blinds them to the real severity of what they're doing. And this brings us full circle to the discussion we started last week, Serving God every day is truly close to us, as the verse says, because all we need to do is gain some perspective, remove the mask of delusion, and we will naturally be adverse to sin. For the weekly Rambam, the 3-chapter and Sefer HaMitzvos fans are going to be continuing with the laws of Sanhedrin, the courts and legal process, through Sunday and Monday. We'll cover the standards of behavior a judge is held to, the prohibition against bribery, certain cases when you can use circumstantial evidence, and more. Next, we've got the laws of witnesses, with lots of interesting details on how to interrogate witnesses, who exactly is qualified to serve as a witness, how to authenticate witnesses' signatures on a document, and from Thursday straight through to the end of the week, we'll run through a detailed list of disqualified witnesses, whether because of personal behavior, bias, or conflict of interest. And over in the 1-chapter track, we'll be moving right along with the laws of Sha'ar Avot HaTumah, describing the various categories of impurity, the laws of food, clothing, and other articles with regards to impurity. As always, if you'd like to learn more about anything you just heard, or if you're interested in joining one of the daily study cycles, check out Chabad.org/daily study for links and resources. All right, with the weekly overview done, it's time to take it day by day. First up, we've got a yard site, which isn't unusual, but what is unusual about this yard site is that it's someone we actually don't like. Today, in the year 1680, a fellow by the name of Nathan of Gaza finally kicked the bucket. Yes, that's Gaza, as in Gaza, the city in Israel. Nathan of Gaza was born in Israel and was reportedly a very gifted scholar, but unfortunately, he gained renown in a less savory way. He was a sort of PR man for the infamous false messiah Shabtai Tzvi, who was active in the mid-1600s. And with his help, Shabtai Tzvi was able to win the hearts and minds of a huge number of Jews at that time. Entire communities became inflamed with Mashiach fever. Some even went so far as to sell their homes and businesses, convinced that they would be imminently redeemed. In case you're not familiar with the story, Shabtai Tzvi ended up being a dangerous and devastating fraud who worsened relations between Jews and Gentiles and created a deep cynicism and skepticism towards the teachings of Kabbalah and Mashiach. Altogether, Nathan of Gaza was largely responsible for one of the darkest and most confusing moments in the long story of our exile. In fact, the Rebbe tells us that at the moment of the Shabtai Tzvi debacle, the Jewish people were thrown into a deep coma, so to speak. The Talmud tells us that one of the ways to arouse someone from a coma is to whisper their true Hebrew name into their ear. That's why God sent the Baal Shem Tov, whose name is Yisrael, the name of the Jewish people themselves, to reveal the teachings of Chassidus, to reinvigorate the demoralized nation and pave the way for the true Mashiach who is coming in our time. Leaving the unsavory Nathan of Gaza behind, Sunday is the birthday of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan in the year 1838. Rabbi Yisrael Meir is famous for his work Mishnah Berurah, a classic codification of halacha that is widely studied by both scholars and laymen. He is also famous for his book Chafetz Chaim, which loosely translates to He Who Wants Life. It's said that he sold the book by literally going into the streets and shouting, "Who wants life? Who wants life?" And when people gathered around, he showed them the title of his book, which comes from a verse in Tehillim. Who is the man who wants life? Guard your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies. And that's exactly what the book is about, the prohibition of lashon hara, speaking badly about others, and how severe it is. The Chafetz Chaim, as he came to be known, is credited with raising an awareness of lashon hara that continues to this day. Monday, the 12th of Shvat, we commemorate the start of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in the year 1943. Now, the main Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that you're probably familiar with took place a few months later in the month of Nisan, but the conflict actually began today, when armed Jews first resisted the Nazis as they began their second deportation from the ghetto. The rebellion succeeded in stalling the Nazis and saving about 3,000 Jews from being immediately deported to death camps. Unfortunately, it also paved the way for the Nazis to return in force 3 months later, which prompted the most dramatic, heroic, and heartbreaking phase of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. As we look back at this dark time in our history, I'm going to encourage all of us, myself included, to think about what a tremendous gift it is to live our lives free of fear, danger, and death, and realize that all the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, along with millions of Jewish martyrs from every era, are looking to us in these final moments of exile. We must use our freedom, which they didn't have, to finally bring Mashiach when we will see how all the suffering of our people, past and present, has been only for the good, and we will exclaim, as the verse states, Oidcha Hashem ki anafta bi, I thankfully praise you, Hashem, for afflicting me. That brings us right into Tuesday, the 13th of Shvat, which marks the date of the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. The camp was liberated by the Soviet Red Army, and the scene they found cannot even be described. The massive camp contained only 7,000 survivors. These were the victims who were too weak to join the murderous death march into Germany. You know, thinking about the unimaginable nightmare that we like to neatly summarize in the word Holocaust, I like to think back to a fantastic talk from Rabbi Nissim Mangel, may he be well, a very accomplished and respected rabbi, writer, and translator. Rabbi Mangel was once walking in the Lower East Side when a Jewish peddler stopped him and tried to sell him some well-priced shirts. Rabbi Mangel replied that he was sure it was a great bargain, but he'd have to come back another day. It was Friday, and he was busy with his Shabbat preparations. Young man, the peddler replied, Shabbat? What Shabbat? Why Shabbat? What does Shabbat even mean? Rabbi Mangel replied, well, to me, Shabbat means a great deal. Well, said the peddler, I don't believe in Shabbat. How can you say that? Rabbi Mangel asked. The peddler replied, young man, if you had seen what I have seen, you would say the same thing. I was in Auschwitz. A person who has been in Auschwitz cannot believe in God. Wordlessly, Rabbi Mangel rolled up his sleeve and showed the man his tattoo, the tattoo that he, like this very man, had received in Auschwitz. In fact, Auschwitz was only one of many camps that Rabbi Mangel survived as a young child. Today, Rabbi Mangel looks back at the suffering he endured, and he does not ask, like so many others, where was God in the Holocaust? And when someone asks him, he answers, where was God? God was with me. I saw him every step of the way. We can't make sense of the Holocaust, yet no human mind can, so better not try. But personally, I look to someone like Rabbi Mangel and the many other extraordinary survivors of this and other genocides, and I find it tremendously inspiring to remember what our people is. We are a godly nation. Ever since we stood at Mount Sinai, as we read in this week's Torah portion, ever since God told us that we would become his treasure, we have been something more than human. We are Jews. We are God's children. The whole world knows it, and very soon the whole world will see it with the coming of Mashiach. Wednesday, we've got a halachic note that is sure to put a smile on your face. In the afternoon mincha prayer, we skip the Tachnun section, being that it is the afternoon before the 15th of Shvat, which is a minor holiday. In Jewish history, Wednesday marks the yahrzeit of Rabbi Yaakov Yehoshua Falk on the 14th of Shvat, 1756. Rabbi Falk is widely known in the scholarly world for his work Pnei Yeshua, and he's often referred to by that name. He was also a respected Rav in 4 different cities throughout his life: Lemberg, also known as Lvov, also known as Lviv, as well as Berlin, Metz, and finally Frankfurt, where he served for 16 years. I've heard, though I haven't been able to research it, that one of the reasons the Pnei Yeshua bounced around so much was because of his dedication to the truth and his refusal to bend to the whims of influential community members. In Hasidic history, the Pnei Yeshua is particularly remembered as the teacher of the Maggid of Mezrich before he met the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, the Pnei Yeshua was the one who actually encouraged the Maggid to visit the Baal Shem Tov in the first place, to seek a cure for his frail health. Moving on to Thursday, we once again skip Tachnun because it is Chamisha Aser B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, the New Year for trees. First and foremost, the New Year for trees is a legal term. If you're a farmer in the land of Israel, there's a couple different tithes you've got to take from all your crops. It's kind of like taxes, except it's holy and it brings you blessings, as opposed to regular taxes, which are much less holy and bring you headaches and occasional moments of panic, like, oh my gosh, did I forget to list my goldfish as a dependent? But like taxes, these tithes have to be given in the right year. You can't use part of this year's crop to pay for last year's tithes, and you can't use last year's crop to pay for this year's tithes. So when it comes to the tithes for trees, the cutoff date is the 15th of Shvat. That's the dividing line between one year and the next. But in addition to the legal definition, the Rebbe always reminds us of the spiritual meaning of Chamisha Aser B'Shvat. Just like a tree, each of us is expected to grow from year to year and to produce good deeds, which are like our fruits. Looking at it that way, the 15th of Shvat is a day to reflect on our own lives and think about how we can continue to grow and progress in our service of God. It's also a Jewish custom to mark the day by enjoying fruits, particularly fruits that are part of the 7 species that the land of Israel is known for: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. Israel is also known for its great variety of weird, watery-tasting juices that come in funny-shaped bottles. If you ever shopped at a kosher grocery store, you know what I'm talking about. But alas, those did not make it onto the list. Wrapping up this week, Shabbat, we've got another one of those delightful local Purims that we love featuring on this show. This time, it's Purim Saragossa, named after the town of Saragossa, which was the capital of Aragon. Now, Aragon sounds like it should be the name of some fantasy realm where everyone fires bows and arrows and wears shining armor, but it was actually a place in modern-day Spain where everyone fired bows and arrows and wore shining armor, so that's the difference. I'll attach a link to the full story, but I'll give you the rundown here. I used to listen to this story on a cassette tape as a kid, read by the much-beloved storyteller Uncle Yossi Goldstein of blessed memory. Like all Chabad kids, I never really watched movies growing up, so my childhood drama was lying in bed listening to Uncle Yossi solemnly proclaim Toras emes, a true Torah, in his scariest dream voice. And let me tell you, it was more thrilling than any jump scare Hollywood could ever dream up. Anyways, the story goes like this. When the king of Aragon passed through the Jewish quarter, the Jews would go out to greet him with the Holy Torah scrolls, the Sifrei Torah, as a mark of respect. The king knew that these scrolls are the most precious objects in Judaism, so he was very gratified by the honor. Well, one day, one of the old anti-Semitic minister characters decided to change that. This minister's name was Marcus, and as a kid, I distinctly remember being very put out by that because the Hasidic musical duo Eighth Day, who were and still are my all-time favorite band, are named Shmuley and Bensi Marcus. So I was like, what? We can't have bad guy Marcuses in here. That can't be a thing. Anyway, that was his name. Now, this Marcus character told the king that the Jews were giving him quite literally a hollow honor. Although they brought out the Torah cases to greet the king, they removed the actual sacred scrolls first. Now, this was actually true, because you're not supposed to remove the actual scrolls from the ark unless it's necessary. But of course, this hadn't been a problem, at least until now. The king was disturbed by this allegation and resolved to put it to the test. Next time he would pass through the Jewish quarter, he would ask to have the cases opened. If, as Marcus claimed, they were empty, the Jews would be harshly punished. If, however, the claim would be proven wrong, Marcus himself would be killed for having misled the king. Yeah, this king was one of those put people to death kings. That's why all his people carried bows and arrows and wore armor and such. Anyway, the night before the king was scheduled to come through, every single synagogue attendant in the city had an identical dream. Now, there's two versions of this part. In Chabad.org, it says that they were all told the following: "Arise, waste no time, danger threatens the Jews. Hurry to the synagogue and quickly put the Sifrei Torah inside their cases, but say not a word to anyone." But the way I heard it from the Uncle Yossi tapes as a kid, they just heard the words Toras emes, a true Torah, repeated over and over again. Whatever they actually dreamed, the fact remains that they got the message and put the Torahs back in the cases. When the king asked to have the Torah cases opened, the scrolls were, of course, found inside, and the wicked Marcus was put to death. His name was wiped from history, to be replaced by the much more righteous and lyrical Marcus brothers we all know and love, and who I will feature in this episode's outro music. Now, just like the original Purim, the story of this miraculous salvation was recorded in a scroll, which is still read in some communities on the 17th of Shevat. As I was writing up the story of Purim Saragossa for this podcast, I got to thinking about the phrase Toras emes, a true Torah, and what it means for us. Chassidus reminds us that the mark of something true is when it's consistent always. A lie only seems authentic, but when you look at it from another angle, the deceit is revealed. Truth is true from every angle. Looking at it that way, the call for a true Torah could be a reminder to all of us. We all learn Torah, but is the Torah we learn true? Do we carry it through to all other areas of our life, or do we leave it behind at the door when we exit the synagogue? As we remember the 604th anniversary of Purim Saragossa, let's think about what we can do to make the Torah we learn more of a reality in our lives and take its teachings with us into the week ahead.
Oh, you're the one I was trying to find. You're the one of a kind.
Your Jewish Week is produced by Chabad.org, written and recorded by me, Rabbi Dovi. Theme music by Rabbi Dovi.
Oh, you're the one